Today, I'm going to teach you what I think are the three most important modern drinks in all of India. You ready? Chalo. First, we're going to talk about coffee, but specifically kapi or South Indian filter coffee. Now, you may not associate coffee with India, but let me tell you, after this, you will. Like all good stories, it starts with a legend, and this legend is a 1600 AD saint named Baba Budan. And Baba Budan went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and in his journey, he stopped at a port city in Yemen known for exquisite coffee. He smuggled 7 of the beans into his beard, and when he got back, he planted them in a courtyard. Now, seems like it is the birthplace of coffee in India, and thus the name of the hills were named after him, the Baba Budan Hills. But other legends also exist. Some say it was the French and Germans who brought coffee to the southern part of India and really craving it during World War II. See, all sea routes were closed, and India had a severe shortage of coffee. Due to the shortage of coffee, it was mixed with chicory, which was an additive that you still find today in kapi. See, this is the time when the Coffee Board of India was created, and the Coffee Board of India is really credited to popularizing Indian coffee in so many ways. At some point in the 19th century, South Indians widely began brewing coffee with milk and sweetening it with a little bit of honey or jaggery, and now in modern day you see a lot of white chini or sugar, and it became a daily necessity in southern Indian households, and still to this day, the popularity has only grown. Traditionally, South Indian filter coffee is made on a plantation that is washed with a style called Arabic or pea berry coffees. The beans are dark roasted, ground, and blended with chicory, with the coffee constituting about 80 to 90%, and chicory tends to be on the 10 to 20% of the mixture. The chicory's slight bitterness contributes to the flavor of Indian coffee in a beautiful way, and traditionally, jaggery or honey is used as a sweetener, but again, we see more white sugar coming into play here. And now it's in a stainless steel coffee filter as opposed to clay pots back in the day. The next I want to talk about is haldi doodh, or better known in the West as turmeric milk or golden milk. Now, turmeric has certainly seen quite a makeover in the West as of late, but did you know that turmeric was first used in Ayurvedic medicine that dates back over 4,500 years ago? See, anyone watching this from the subcontinent knows that haldi is used all the time. If you cut yourself, haldi. Weddings, haldi. You burn yourself, haldi. Haldi is a magic cure-all in so many ways because of the curcumin content. What is curcumin? Simply put, it's an anti-inflammatory. But the brilliant nature of haldi doodh is so much more complex than that. Haldi being the Hindi word for turmeric and doodh being the Hindi word for milk. Translation, golden milk. Well, turmeric is actually part of the ginger family, and its compounds are unbelievable. Typically, in haldi doodh, you will find a mixture of black pepper, or long pepper as it was traditionally used, cinnamon, and turmeric. The milk is then brought to a simmer, not a boil. Then I make a powder like you see right here. We put that into the milk, and then we whisk that really well. This is something that is usually sipped in the evening before bed, so the body has ample time to use the optimum benefits of the curcumin. Although many Indians continue to brew haldi doodh by traditional methods, today you see a lot more cracked black pepper than a long pepper that was traditionally used. Black pepper also contains something called piperine, a compound that's used to absorb the curcumin in the body up to 2,000% more than it typically is. So take note if you're in the West. Turmeric has to have a fat to bind, and that lipid, the curcumin, has to bind to it, and it also has to have black pepper. Ginger is also added to the powder that I use to give it that nice little taste. Finally, we want to talk about arguably the most important of all of the drinks of India, and that is chai. We cannot talk about chai without talking about the East Indian Company. And why? Well, the only trading company that garnered permission from Queen Elizabeth I to trade in India was the East India Company. We wouldn't have chai in its modern methods if it wasn't for the East India Company, good, bad, and indifferent. See, the company held power until 1858, when after a year of soldiering and civilian rebellion across North India happens, Queen Victoria says enough is enough, because the East India Company kept fighting with everyone, and so she dissolved the company and took over the country until 1947. See, British people fell in love with Chinese tea. But in the 1820s, the Chinese began restricting trade to the East India Company because they knew that trading company was trying to steal the plans and knowledge for how to process tea. So the East India Company started looking at other places to grow tea, and it wanted to control Assam. See, Assam sat along the Silk Road, which was connected to China, but the region has been under Burmese control at that time since the beginning of the 13th century. The East India Company convinced the people of Assam that it wanted to protect them, and it went to war with Burma in 1824. The East India Company won and took control of Assam and put in charge of Upper Assam, but in 1838, they fired the people in charge and took over the entire state. Why? Because Assam was perfect territory to grow tea. The first 50 years of this system of tea, well, the tea tasted terrible. The Brits lacked the workers and processing knowledge until they secretly smuggled somebody in under the guise of being a merchant in China to steal the plants. And the process of making tea wasn't always easy. So what did they do? Well, they made tea once they stole the plants from the Chinese, and then they had a byproduct, and this was called CTC tea. Kind of a tongue twister, but it stood for crushed, torn, and curled. The process to make CTC was a byproduct of the tea that was being sold to all the Brits. What did they do with this byproduct? Well, a process was invented in the 1930s by Sir William McKercher in Assam. That method for CTCT can be known as homogenizing the flavor of black tea. When the tea was crushed, torn, and curled, the process caused that tea to break down the cell walls. The broken cells became fully oxidized, causing the tea to taste even stronger. But it lost all of the subtleties that made tea so wonderful. Well, what do you do with all this? Well, the association began pushing cheap tea to the masses, giving it away at public gatherings, brewing demonstrations, and setting up railway stalls and tea stalls all over India, including religious festivals. The association convinced the local government to give industrial workers a daily tea break, conveniently establishing religiously segregated tea stalls. It also gave it all away to railway wallas. Kettles and tea packets were starting to sell all over the place. In came the chaiwalas. And these chaiwalas, or roadside tea stands, started adding incredible Ayurvedic spices that really changed it. It turned this cheap, rather bitter tea into something that was beautiful and palatable. Jugar. That is the spirit of the story of chai. Jugar or jugad would translate to doing what you can with what is given to you. Tea in its nature was very classist. In its nature, British drank and sold high-quality tea, and from the dust they gave to the Indians. This is a lot of the story of how the British treated India during its occupation. While the British may have forced the tradition of drinking tea to Indians, they couldn't control what it meant to them over the years. And that's why chai made this list. Hope you enjoy the video.